Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's once again October, which means it's once again horror month on the channel, and all 5 Sundays this month, we're going to Sundays this month, that's right, instead of Saturdays, because Halloween's on a Sunday, so it makes sense, we will be doing some horror movies. And we'll be starting with the third film in the soon-to-be 5-film Scream franchise, Scream 3, released in the year 2000. Taking place 3 years after Scream 2, the film once again follows Sidney Prescott, played by Neve Campbell, who, you guessed it, is being chased by the Ghostface Killer. This time he's going after the cast of a film within the film, Stab 3, and Sidney needs to figure out why, and how he's connected to her. In addition to Neve Campbell, David Arquette returns as Dewey Riley, and Courtney Cox returns as Gale Weathers. Liev Schreiber's back as well, but we also get some new faces, including Patrick Dempsey as Mark, Scott Foley as Roman, Emily Mortimer as Angela, and Kelly Rutherford as Christine. And much like Scream 2 didn't do quite as well financially as Scream 1, although it was basically identical, Scream 3 dropped off a tiny bit from Scream 2, but not much, making about $162 million on a $40 million budget. But unlike the first two films, this was actually met with mixed reviews from critics. And out of the current 4 films, it's actually considered to be the weakest in the franchise. And it was mainly attributed to major script rewrites due to real-life events, which we'll talk about more after I tell you what happens in the movie. And with that being said, let me tell you what happens with the movie, as we take a look back at Scream 3, released in the year 2000. So our film starts in Hollywood, California with Cotton Weary, who, if you don't remember, was previously accused of and then exonerated of the murder of Sidney's mother. He then gets a call from someone who he originally thinks is an attractive woman who's a fan, but it actually turns out to be the Ghostface Killer, who claims to be at the apartment of his girlfriend Christine. And sure enough, as Christine is getting chained, she gets attacked by the Ghostface Killer, who talks to her through the wall in Cotton's voice. But it can't be Cotton because he hasn't reached the apartment yet. He finally does reach the apartment and looks for her, but she attacks him with a golf club, thinking that he's gone crazy, before she's killed from behind by Ghostface. Cotton then does battle with the killer, who gets the upper hand and stabs him in the chest, and then kills him by stabbing him in the head. And now to catch up with some old friends, first Sidney Prescott, who lives in a heavily armed house with a dog. Sidney currently works as a crisis counselor for an abused woman's hotline under a fake name of Laura. Gale Weathers, meanwhile, was giving some kind of lecture on how to be a journalist or whatever, and she's confronted by a detective named Mark Kincaid, who shows her a picture that he found of Sidney Prescott's mother, Maureen, on Cotton Weary's dead body. And while feeding her dog, Sidney also learns about Cotton's death on the news. We then head to Hollywood, California to the movie set of Stab 3, which centers around the events of the first Scream movie, weirdly enough, and director Roman Bridger as well as producer John Milton are trying to get the movie from being shut down. We also meet the stars of Stab 3, Tom Prince, Sarah Darling, Angela Tyler, Jennifer Jolie, that sound familiar, and Tyson Fox. Gale then arrives on the set where she meets Jennifer Jolie, who's actually portraying her in the film. She also comes to find that Dewey works there as a consultant, and they have a rehash of the same argument they had in Scream 2 before she's kicked out because they don't want reporters there. Meanwhile, things are not going very well for Sidney back at her place, as she's having very spooky, scary nightmares about her mother, as well as the Ghostface Killer. Back at the movie studio, Sarah, who's played by notable anti-vax douchebag Jenny McCarthy, shows up to do a screen test with Roman over the phone. However, she quickly realizes she's not talking to Roman, rather the killer, who then tries to kill her. She then hides in a row of Ghostface masks, but uh-oh, turns out one of those is real, and it's stabby time. And unfortunately, there's no vaccine for being stabbed in the back, not that she would have taken it anyway. Meanwhile, Gale and Dewey are having lunch, and it gets revealed what happened between the two films. Basically, Gale helped nurse Dewey back to health before she got offered a role on 60 Minutes and left. We then go to the house of Jennifer Jolie, who's freaking out because apparently the killer is killing in the order of the Stab 3 script, and in that script, she's next. Dewey lives on the property as well, he has a motorhome there, and we also meet Jennifer's bodyguard Stephen Stone, played by Patrick Warburton, who you probably know as the voices from Joe from Family Guy and Kronk from The Emperor's New Groove. Gale and Dewey then go down to the set to investigate the murder, and they're told by Roman that there's actually 3 different versions of the script, and it's unknown which one the killer is using. Roman is then taken down for questioning by the police, as it's believed he was the last one who talked to Sarah before she died. And meanwhile, back at Sydney's place, she's doing the hotline thing, and guess what? The person she's talking to isn't actually an abused woman, rather someone who's gonna abuse her, as the Ghostface killer knows where she is. Meanwhile, Dewey, Jennifer, Tom, and Angela all camp out at Jennifer's place as they believe there's strength in numbers. Good call there. Gail also shows up and is brought into the house after Stone finds her snooping around it. She then shows Dewey the picture of Maureen Prescott, but Gail can't figure out where the picture was taken. Dewey then realizes that the picture was taken at the movie studio where Stab was filmed, meaning Maureen Prescott at some point during her life left Woodsboro and lived in Los Angeles. Meanwhile, Steven, who stepped into Dewey's trailer, gets a call from someone he thinks is Dewey, but it's actually the killer who, kills him. The killer then cuts the power to the house and sends the group some threatening faxes, and they all decide to leave except for Tom, who decides to stay. Tom, then like an idiot, lights his lighter over a gas stove, and guess what? The killer cut the gas line, and that whole house is blowing the fuck up. After they're blown from the house, Gail is almost killed by Ghostface, but Dewey shoots him in the chest multiple times, but somehow he gets away. And then a whole bunch of chaos breaks out. Jennifer punches Dewey, and Gail punches Jennifer, and then Angela comes out of nowhere and they don't know where she came from, and nobody can trust nobody. Oh, and to make things even more interesting, this Ghostface is claiming to be the actual person who killed Maureen Prescott. Detective Kincaid is getting antsy meanwhile and demands that Dewey bring Sydney down here. He doesn't have to wait long though, as Sydney already came down here herself. They then go down to the movie studio where they find Martha Meeks hiding, who is the little sister of Randy, their old friend who was killed in Scream 2. Turns out Randy left them a videotape going over the rules to the final film in a horror trilogy. Basically, in the third film of a horror trilogy, all bets are off, the rules don't apply, and anyone can die, even Sydney. Gail and Jennifer then head down to the archives of the movie studio, where they meet the archives manager, played by Carrie Fisher. Only she's playing a character that's not actually Carrie Fisher, but just looks exactly like Carrie Fisher, which is pretty funny. She then gives them the files on Maureen Prescott, who used to go under the stage name of Rena Reynolds, and turns out she did 3 films that were directed by John Milton, the producer of Stab 3. Meanwhile, Sydney starts making her way for the movie studio, and she gets major flashbacks as she ends up in an exact replica of her old house. She then hangs out a bit in the replica of her room before things start getting spooky, and yep, she's attacked by Ghostface. The killer chases her throughout the house, and she initially gets away before the killer starts using her mother's voice to lure her back in, and then she just decides to jump out a window. But when the police detectives search the house, they don't find anyone there. Luckily though, Detective Kincaid seems to believe her and places her under police protection. Dewey, Jennifer, and Gail then go confront John Milton about Maureen Prescott, and this is probably the most fucked up part of this whole movie. Basically, John tells them that Maureen was sexually taken advantage of while she was working under him, and that's pretty much why she left Hollywood. They're then heading back to the police station, but they get a call from Sydney, who says that her and the detectives are at John Major's house for Roman's birthday party. And when they get there, Roman, Tyson, and Angela are there, but Sydney is nowhere to be found. Roman and Jennifer then go explore the house, and Roman goes down into the basement looking for a secret screen room, but he never comes back up again. Dewey and Gail do some investigation of their own, and they stumble upon a closet which contains the Ghostface mask, as well as the voice changer that has all their voices on it. Gail then heads down into the basement herself, where she finds Jennifer hiding, as well as Roman's dead body in a coffin. They then regroup with Angela and try to run, but Angela reveals that she fucked John Major to get this role, and she's not gonna die with them. And she's right, she didn't die with them. She died by herself when she tried to run downstairs and got stabbed by Ghostface. Ghostface then chases Jennifer and Gail upstairs where they regroup with Tyson and Dewey, and a good old-fashioned 4-on-1 scuffle gets underway. And Ghostface somehow wins this pretty easily by isolating Gail, knocking out Dewey, locking Jennifer in a secret room, and throwing Tyson off a fucking balcony. Jennifer then runs down the secret hallway from the secret room until Ghostface chases her back into the secret room, back in the room they started, only behind the mirrors. Dewey tries to shoot for the mirrors to get to them, but they're a little bit too late as Jennifer's already been stabbed to death. They begin looking for Ghostface, but he finds Gale first and tackles her down some stairs into the basement, knocking himself out in the process. He then recovers just as Dewey enters and throws his knife at Dewey, luckily the handle only hitting Dewey in the head, but that does knock him out. Meanwhile, at the police station, Sidney is bored and reading their file on her before she gets a call from Ghostface. Ghostface tells Sidney that he's got Gale and Dewey held hostage and he's gonna kill them unless she comes to the house. Before Sidney goes, however, she steals a firearm from the police department. Looks like Ghostface prepared for this though, as she arrives at the house, he makes her use a metal detector on herself and she throws the gun into the pool. She then goes into the house and sees Dewey and Gale tied up, and uh-oh, there's Ghostface, but guess what, bitch? Sidney had a second gun and shoots him multiple times in the chest, and that's it, he's already gone, fuck. Detective Kincaid then shows up and he's like, yo, what's going on, homies? And Ghostface is like, ayo, and they have a little bit of a battle until Kincaid gets knocked out. Ghostface then chases Sidney throughout the house before Sidney finds a secret bookshelf, which leads to the secret film room. And in that film room, films of her mother, Maureen, are being played, and Ghostface is somehow already in there. Ain't that a bitch? Also, turns out Ghostface was wearing a bulletproof vest, so that makes sense. And turns out the killer actually knew Maureen pretty well and even tried to reconnect with her 4 years later, but he was denied. Why did he do that? Well, because the killer is actually Roman, and Roman is actually Sidney's half-brother and Maureen's son, which she had in Hollywood after she got, date raped or sexually taken advantage of at that party, which is pretty fucked up. He also reveals because Maureen rejected him, she showed the footage of Maureen cheating with Billy Loomis's dad to Billy Loomis, which prompted Billy to kill Maureen Prescott and set forth the events of both Scream 1 and 2. He also got super butthurt about how Sidney got famous for all that because that's what he wanted, and now that's why he's gonna kill her. But he's also gonna frame her for all this shit by killing John Major, which he does by slitting his throat. He'll then use the voice changer and a message on Major's answering machine to make it look like Sidney did it, and he will be the sole survivor and the hero of the day. And then they both just kind of yell at each other and say fuck you, no fuck you, and then they start to fight. Dewey and Gale, meanwhile, are trying to break into the room, and Roman is winning that fight. He is just whipping Sidney's ass and choking her out. But before he can finish the job, the lights go out and somebody picks the lock, but it's not Gale and Dewey, it's actually Detective Kincaid. Roman then very quickly knocks Kincaid out again, and Kincaid is 0 for 2 now. But uh-oh, Roman, Sidney has your knife, but double uh-oh, Roman has Kincaid's gun and shoots Sidney twice in the chest, seemingly killing her. He then starts to plan on how to kill Dewey and Gale, but as he turns around, Sidney's already gone. And bada boom, she's behind the bar and stabs him in the back and then again in the chest, because it turns out Roman wasn't the only one wearing a bulletproof vest. Felt like Dr. Seuss with that rhyme. But anyway, Gale and Dewey finally break in and it's all over. Roman's dead, right? Nope, just kidding, he's back up. And Dewey shoots him like 7 times, but he's wearing a bulletproof vest and fucking Sidney's like, dude, shoot him in the head. And he does, and now Roman's dead. Sometime later at Sidney's house, Gale and Dewey are there and Sidney's doing a lot better. Dewey then decides to propose marriage to Gale, to which she accepts. Detective Kincaid is there as well, and he's maybe dating Sidney, I'm not sure if that's implied or not, and they're about to watch a movie, but then, uh-oh, the front door blows open, but Sidney doesn't give a shit, as the events of all this are behind her and finally over. And originally she would have been right, as this was supposed to be the last film in the Scream franchise. It was supposed to be a trilogy, but then 11 years later they changed their mind and decided to make Scream 4, so get fucked, Sidney. And now let's get to our Scream big board, which I totally didn't forget the first time I uploaded this video, and is totally not making me re-upload this. That would be silly. After all, it's pretty obvious where we're going to place this. The big board continues to go in the order of the movies. Scream 1, number 1, Scream 2, number 2, and Scream 3, number 3. So you might have noticed in this film that the plot wasn't quite as good as the first two, and that the movie wasn't quite as violent as the first two either. And that is actually due, believe it or not, to the Columbine High School massacre, which took place in April of 2000. And after that terrible massacre, naturally people needed something to blame. So what did they blame? Did they blame poor parenting? Nope. Did they blame mental illness? No, of course not. They blamed violence in media. Because of course, it's gotta be the movies and video games, right? And because of that, the original script for Scream 3 and what was originally supposed to happen was completely thrown out. So what was originally supposed to happen? And first off, if you don't believe me on this, look up Matthew Lillard interview about Scream 3, where he talks about it himself. According to Matthew Lillard himself, the original script for Scream 3 was his character Stu from the first film, was apparently supposed to be revealed as not actually dead and just living in a mental facility, and he was organizing everything going on from there to get back at Sydney, and apparently it was supposed to even entail Ghostface killing high school students to lure Sydney in or something like that. But then, 3 weeks before they were supposed to start shooting it, Columbine happened, and they threw the whole thing out and went with what we have now. And it's because of these rewrites is why this movie wasn't as good, and apparently sometimes pages of the script were only ready on the exact day of filming. There was also scheduling difficulties with a lot of the main cast as well, and yeah, this whole thing was just kind of cursed from the beginning. I gotta say though, despite all that, it's not terrible. I mean, the acting is still great, of course it is, because it's got an all-star cast. And, you know, you give it a little bit of a pass, when you know about those rewrites. And the whole thing with Roman being, you know, her brother, it's alright. You know, it's a nice twist. It's definitely one I didn't see coming. I saw Roman being the killer coming. I did not see that part of the twist coming. But ultimately, who knows what would have happened if they had gone with that original script with Matthew Lillard. I mean, this could be looked back at maybe, depending on how it went, as on par with Scream 1 and 2. Who knows? We'll never know. It's also partially due to this film that Scream 4 ended up being made, because this was not well received. So if this was well received, would we have gotten Scream 4? Would we be getting Scream 5 in January of 2022? Who's to say? What I do know, though, is that they did the best of what they have, and knowing what I know, personally, I'm gonna give them a pass on this, because it wasn't a terrible film, it just didn't live up to the first two. And the sequel, Scream 4, was actually better, and we'll be covering that probably in January, a little bit before Scream 5 comes out. And who knows, maybe they could reuse Matthew Lillard for Scream 5. I guess we'll find out. But that, ladies and gentlemen, is going to do it for my Scream look back at Scream 3. We'll be continuing our horror month next week with Teeth, which was released in 2007. But that is going to do it from me today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you guys for watching. If you liked it, be sure to like it. If you didn't like it, don't. If you want to follow any of my social media links, they're on the description down below. Thank you to all my patrons for supporting me in both my channels. With all that being said, though, my name is Noah Taff. This has been my review of Scream 3, released in the year 2000, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.